I don't know.
You're good. Okay, go.
Abba, Father, Yahweh, Zebaoth, thank you for bringing us all together. Thank you for your Torah. Thank you for your 7 Moedim. Thank you for your 7th day Shabbat. Thank you for your people, your Ayin Mem. Thank you for eriktology. Thank you for this teaching this day. Thank you for this beautiful day. Thank you for everything, Yahweh. Thank you for revealing us all to everything that you want us to hear. Open our minds and our hearts and our ears. Let us see through your eyes and your ears and your mind and your consciousness. And let us listen and study and to show ourselves approved, that we may become refined and become the image of you, to love our neighbor as ourselves and to love you with all our heart and all ourself, and to Shema, hear, believe, do, guard, and teach, and shomer, Mishpat, Zadokah, Emet, and Hesed. Amen. Hallelujah. Let's go. Woo!
Amen. That was actually, Nicholas, very appropriate for the subject today, which is based, being that this is yesterday, last night, apparently, was the winter solstice. And the greatest regard that you can have of the winter solstice is the fact a friend called up and said, this day, the only day out of the entire year, you can take a chicken egg and maybe swing it to get the yolk down at the bottom and take it on its end, and you can stand it up on a table. And it stands there. It's something to do with the balance of the universe on yesterday. So I put a chicken egg and did it. It's like, hey, there you go. Look at that. What a great day. Anyway, that, and also there's this concept. There's a song. Last week we talked about another song, Emmanuel. There's another song, "Oh Holy Night, Thy Stars Are Brightly Shining." Think about that. "Oh Holy Night, Thy Stars Are Brightly Shining" is the first line, I believe. So there's a concept. How would you say holy night in Hebrew? Anybody want to think for a moment? I will find the page where it's written in the Klein's dictionary. You know, there's always the chance that somebody might tune into one of these things that has never listened to anything else before. And so I sometimes will go over things that we already have gone over, and that you figure everybody already knows this stuff. But just that's why I do that. Just so you know, my eyes are like, I should have brought my glasses up here. I can't hardly read anything for some reason. 89. Gimel Bet Resh, or Gimel Bet Vav Resh. Mighty, courageous, valiant, heroic, warrior, hero, central character in a novel or a drama. Strength, valor, might, courage, heroism. Gabor, Gaborah, heroic. So the idea of being a knight, a K-N-I-G-H-T, that's what Nicholas was just describing attributes of. And the word holy, well, that's the English version of the word kadosh. So you could say Gabor Kadosh would be holy night. And what about thy stars are brightly shining? What has that got to do with anything? Well, if you read the beginning of Revelation, Yeshua appears to John there around 90 AD, island of Patmos, where John was being held in exile captivity. Yeshua shows up, and his hair looks like wool, his eyes on fire, and that gold band across his chest, and he's holding 7 stars in his hand. Is that the constellation of the Pleiades, or not constellation? It's a cluster of stars. If you connect stars together, that forms a constellation, but it's not necessarily a constellation he's holding. He's holding and it's even referred to as the mystery or the secret of the 7 stars. What is that? Well, he doesn't really say. Later, he'll explain a bit. He says, well, the secret or the mystery of the 7 stars is that these are the angels, 7 angels, whose, you might say, regard or they attend to the 7 churches. Well, the word isn't church, it's assemblies, kahal. Came out of Greek ekklesia, but kaf he lamed kahal is the assembly. 7 assemblies. Well, those were in 7 cities, basically Asia Minor, around Turkey. And some people say, well, are those 7 assemblies, are those specifically regarding churches or people that go to those churches that are in particular at that time, or are they 7 dispensations of time, or are they 7 conditions of you might say, human regard of the divine, or are they 7 states, frames of mind of Israel in particular regarding Yahuwah? But there's only one that Yeshua really seems to appreciate. The other 6, he says, if you guys don't snap out of it, if you don't do what you're supposed to do, I'm going to unplug your light. I'm going to quench you. I'm going to break off the branch, as it were. It's almost like the picture, like this menorah in the background. This picture, it says that he's walking. Yeshua's walking amidst the candlesticks. Remember, there was a music video many years ago by the Police, at least it was by Sting, where he had a whole room filled with candlesticks, and he's walking amidst that. Did he take that from that passage in Revelation? I don't know, but there's a whole bunch of maybe a few hundred candlesticks. Or is there one 7-branched menorah that Yeshua is standing in the presence of? See, once, we've talked about this before, that when you take what's written in Hebrew and then you turn it into Greek or Latin or German and then throw it into English, or then you make it modern English so that people can understand, you really don't know exactly what it was saying. You get a general kind of a feeling of an idea, but it's not exactly what it said. So is Yeshua standing in the presence of a 7-branched menorah, or is he standing in a room full of menorahs? Because the word menorah literally simply means the place, the mem prefix, where or nun is generating, hey is expressing. So mem, nun, vav, resh, hey, that could be the headlight of your car. That could be a street light. That could be a candle. That could be an oil lantern. A flashlight even is a menorah. Technically, a menorah is not this shape. That's just the shape that Yahweh described it back there in Exodus 25 and thereafter, those chapters where he said, this is how you make the articles of the Mishkan. So the idea that he's standing in the presence, lifnei, penun yod is face, so it's like in the face of, in the regard to the, in the proximity, that in the Aaronic benediction, that phrase, panav aleka, your face upon them. Does that literally mean his face, or does that mean he looks to give them regard, or it's in his presence? It can mean all those things. Not necessarily literally the face. It all depends on how you choose to see it. So if he's standing at a menorah, let's say, just to picture a scene, and he's describing each of the 7 assemblies as if they are one of the branches of the menorah, and then he says, I've got this mystery of 7 stars, which are the angels, the messengers. Well, is it messengers or is it message? Is it malak, mem lamed aleph kaf is the word for angel. It's also one sent on a mission. Well, again, the thing about Hebrew is that the mem as the prefix letter can mean the one who, or the tool by which, or the object, or the place of, or away from, out of. How do you know what it is? Well, it's all those things. And so how do you then know what it's saying? And what I personally do is I try to take as many of those considerations to account as possible. In other words, instead of trying to say, well, this is the one thing it's talking about. It says it's talking about the angel of each assembly, of each church. It's like, perhaps it's the message. That's something that's sent. There's 7 messages to the churches. It's just to try to wrap your mind around it. You got to make sense of this for yourself. Well, why the word for star? What's the why was he holding a star? Well, what's the word star? Kokav, kaf, vav, kaf, bet, kokab, kokav. Remember back when we were kids, we'd sometimes do camping out or go in Boy Scouts or something, and they have kind of a fun, easy meal to make is shish kebab, K-A-B-O-B. That's kind of a Middle Eastern sort of a thing. It's where you take a stick or a piece of metal and skewer a whole bunch of things together. That's called a kebab. So if you look up in the dictionary under kaf, bet, that's what you see. Hooked together, skewered. Kind of like severing, connecting the dots, connecting the pieces of meat or vegetables. Well, if you take the second letter and duplicate it, make it the second and the third for the spelling of a word, well, reverse the process. If you have kaf, bet, and that's kebab, what if you just have kaf, bet? It's still basically something associated. Well, like skewered together. Well, that's the word for kaf, bet in the word for star. If star is kaf, vav, kaf, bet, ka, kova, kokav. Well, the kaf as a prefix letter can be just a prefix, means like or as. So it could be read, if you eliminate the vav there, like a kaf bet. Skewered? Well, what does that mean? Well, so you look under kaf bet, and it means fire extinguisher or quenched. What's that got to do with being skewered? Well, the Bible story comes to my mind is Zimri and Cosby. They were blatantly, flagrantly, you and your stupid instructions, your laws. Zimri took hold of the hand of Cosby, who was the young lady who was, I think, the daughter of the king of Moab or Midian, I think it was. Anyway, went into the tent and were going about their illicit behavior. And a guy named Phineas, or the other way to spell the pronunciation of his name is Pincus. I knew a guy named Pincus once. It's Phineas or Pincus. Why don't they know the difference? Well, it's Pei Nun Chet, Phenach. Anyway, he went in and he harpooned, skewered Zimri and Cosby together and extinguished their lives. And because of that act, Yahweh gave him a covenant of peace, or a Brit Shalom. And the interesting thing, if you look into that story, in the Hebrew text, it's written just as any normal thing is written, but often there's a little asterisk by the word Shalom. And if you look off to the side, in Stone Tanakh, it's written in Hebrew, it says fractioned Vav. Well, apparently it's one of the jots and tittles, in that in the original writing, the old scroll, that one letter, the Vav in the word Shalom, was written in 2 halves with a break in the middle. It's fractioned. It's called the broken Vav. Well, why? Well, nobody knows. So now you can make up a story just for your own understanding. So I would be sitting here thinking, well, what's a vav? A vav is a nail or a hook or something which attaches. Well, Zimri and Crosby were attached by this skewer. They were attached by Zimri's Zakar previously, and then they were doubly attached by the Kaf Bet. But why would that be used with a covenant of peace? The word peace is Shin Lamed Vav Mem, Shalom. Well, what is peace? Peace is where the relationship is doing what it's supposed to. And the primary relationship of the covenant is between Yahweh Elohim, Yahweh Zavot, the Elohim of Israel, and Israel. So it's Israel behaving the way Israel's supposed to, according to the terms of the covenant, and then Yahweh doing what he said he would, according to the terms of the covenant. Then you have Shalom, in which case everything that when Yahweh says, this is my people, that's Zechariah 13:9, I believe it is. Well, what's happening there? Well, it's another kind of a terrible story. He says the whole city of Jerusalem is going to be in an invasion of warfare, set on fire. 2/3 of the people will die in the conflagration, and 1/3 he will bring through the fire. Refined as silver is refined, tried as gold is tried. That means that's put into the crucible of Nun Samik, which is put to the test, assay. What are you worth? What is your essence as a person, as a people? And then that's where it says, and that 1/3 that survive what's happening there will come into and through the fire, and they will say, Yahuwah Elohi. That's the script, these two words, Yahuwah Elohi. Yahweh essentially is my Elohim. And Yahuwah will look at them and say, this is my people. Well, that's perhaps the greatest achievement, other than hearing on that final day, standing at as what's called the white throne of judgment. Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of Yahweh, the place that's been prepared for you. I mean, to hear those words, well done, good and faithful servant, or to be regarded as the favored child of Yahweh, our Father. How do you aspire or attain that status? What's the frame of mind that we just heard about? Nicholas was speaking the words in the opening prayer there. Well, it's optional. So because Phineas was filled with a zeal, I mean, he was angry, but he was disturbed, but he was like, we're standing here getting reprimanded for misbehaving, and right in the middle of that, the guy was a prince of Israel, and he was taking the princess, a daughter of the king of the foreign neighbor, technically an enemy. They were under the guise of being friends at that time. But remember, Balaam had gone and said, you know what you guys need to do if you want to get the advantage over Israel. Because you go back and look at the story of Balaam, the prophet, Balaam's ass, that whole story, is that he was not a bad guy. He was not even an enemy. He wasn't working for the enemy exactly. Yahweh talked to him. He got messages from on high. He wasn't a false prophet. He wasn't Israel, but he was just maybe you could call him a seer. Maybe you could call him a wise man, a sage. He was a smart guy, a gifted man with spiritual connections. Wasn't an evil man. And not only that, but Elohim, he was visited by an angel right there on the road, and the donkey pulled aside and wouldn't keep going. The angel was standing there with a drawn sword, and Balaam was beating the donkey and saying, I'd kill you. And then and the donkey says, why are you doing this to me? And it's like, wow, because now he's have a conversation with a talking donkey. And then his eyes were open and he saw the angel standing there with the sword. And the angel said, if the donkey hadn't stopped, I'd be killing you right now. It's like Balaam's like, oops. And then the angel let him pass and said, okay, now go on, but make sure you only say what Elohim tells you to say. Okay. So he goes to the place where the king of, I think the two are in cahoots together, Moab and Midian. And the interesting thing, both those guys were Abraham's descendants also. Distant cousins, you might say, with Israel. But anyway, Israel had come out of the time of the 40 years in the wilderness, and there was just a mass, millions of them, this invading swarm, this horde. And these other kings were looking there and say, we own this land, we live here. And all of a sudden there's this invasion of millions of people. And they had hired Balaam, come and curse Israel, would you? Because they knew that he was reputed to have this spiritual clout. When he said something, he could see into the spirit realm and had some real legitimacy. And they were going to pay him to utter a curse. And he gets up there, they build an altar and offer a sacrifice, and he says what he sees, which is that Israel is blessed. Who is like you, Israel? I mean, favored from on high. And the guys that hired him under the curse was, shut up, man! What are you doing? You're stating the state. Your statement is declaring the state of their blessing, and we want you to project a curse. And he said, it doesn't work that way. I can't just stand here and say words. I can only say what I hear from on high. I'm the channeler. But you see, he was channeling Yahuwah's words. Like I say, he wasn't a bad guy. And I think it was 3 times they maybe you just need to collect your thoughts. Here, let's go up to another mountain and build another altar and compose yourself and get it together. We're paying you, remember, to curse these people. And each time he blessed them, and the people that hired him were really upset with him. And then he pulls some dirty deed. What he said was, listen, I need your money. Thank you for paying me, but I can't really do that. But let me tell you how to curse Israel. You can get Israel to curse itself. See, nobody can reach in and curse Israel. But the reason Israel is blessed is because they have a covenant with Yahweh Zavot, the creator, the owner, the sustainer of the entire universe. And what he said to Israel is, you got to walk in my ways. You got to be my people. So what you do is you read close and I'm kind of adding a little bit here. You find out what the covenant is. He didn't tell him that. He just said, what you do is you say, you make them break the terms of the covenant. So what you do, because Yahweh even said, see, this is the kicker. It wasn't that Balaam was so smart he figured it out, and it wasn't that he was so sneaky he told kings of Midian and Moab special information that nobody else had. Yahweh said to Balaam, he said, because there is no sorcery and divination in Israel, they can't be stopped. What's sorcery and divination? Witchcraft, magic. It's more than that. It's Elohim Achrim. It's more than that. It's looking to other deities. Is it science or is it religion? There's nothing wrong with science. Is sorcery and divination a different dimension of science? That's a question we could think about. If you know that if you strike something with a hammer, it'll move it. If you need to really move it, hit it with a bigger hammer. Or then they design different types of hammers, something called a dead blow hammer, it's hollow and it's got sand in it. And so when you swing it and hit it, the sand inside of it hits it with a different force of mass. And it has a different effect on the object you're hitting. Does that mean if people are smart enough technologically to figure out how things work, oh no, that's evil, don't do that? Where do you draw the line between contemplating physics, chemistry, resonance, vibration, frequency? Oh no, what about the solfeggio tones? What about essential oils? I mean, I've heard people say those are evil, don't touch them. And other people say they're medical, they're medicinal, they're just what Yahweh built and gave us as part of nature. Is it any better to go to get pharmaceuticals, which are, well, if you look into that, I heard somebody say a long time ago, virtually all, let's put it in qualifications there, virtually all pharmaceuticals are derivatives of petroleum, oil. What they do, thank you, Mr. Rockefeller, 100 years ago or so, is they looked at all the herbs that worked. And then chemists figured out exactly what are the structure of the molecules in that herb. And then because the oil molecule just works wonderfully for this, they took the oil molecule and rearranged it to imitate the herbal molecule, and then turned that into pharmaceutical medicine. And then the same people, Mr. Rockefeller and his ilk, established the American Medical Association, which bigger influence worldwide, doctor schools, and then they gave people licenses to practice medicine if they would learn how to diagnose symptoms so that they could prescribe those pharmaceuticals made from the oil molecule. And what used to be herbs became taboo and became witchcraft. And anybody pushing herbs was scandalized. That's how the medical association has developed through all these years. Those are just facts of history. Whether that's good or bad, you have to figure that out. Whether you want to go along with what they say, that's up to you. But that's just how it happened. But does that mean if we go back and look at herbs and resonance and frequency, I remember hearing back when I was a kid, you're watching TV and movies, and the best example of a foreign culture being a bunch of idiots, a bunch of troglodytes, cavemen, ignorant buffoons, is that their doctors, what they call medicine men, witch doctors, if somebody's feeling bad, they take a rattle and they shake it. or they light some herb on fire, sage or some other herb, and they let the smoke go in the room. That scares away the demons. Really? Or they take a feather and they, wave it over you. It's like, what a bunch of idiots. Oh, wait a minute. Only nowadays, the more you look into stuff, it's like, no, that's what really works. It's all the drugs, which are the witchcraft. Is because the word in Greek for sorcery is actually pharmakia, drug sorcery. And so you look in the book of Revelation where it says, those who practice sorcery don't get into the kingdom of heaven. Oh, okay. Don't do that. How do you do that? Well, it's the word pharmakia. Wait a minute. Those who take pharmaceutical medicines aren't going to get into the kingdom of heaven? Or those doctors who go to medical school to learn how to prescribe? Or those people standing behind the counter at the pharmacy who sit there and grind the various different things and put them into capsules? They're not going to get into the kingdom of heaven? Is that what it's saying? You can interpret it however you want, but it's saying something along those lines. It's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. That's right. It makes no sense. So now you got to figure out what to do. So you could say, well, I'm going to pretend it means only those people who practice the entertainment art of magic, sleight of hand. Is that what it's talking about? Or the people who invoke evil spirits? Is that what it's talking about? Or the people that channel voices, entities from beyond our dimension? Then some people might think, oh, shut up, you can't do that stuff. None of that stuff is real. But it is. I've seen, I've heard, and it's like, well, that doesn't make it real. And it's like, well, you can believe whatever you want. But people who are highly regarded by a bunch of other people think it's real, act like it's real. And there was, for example, there was a movie that was kind of interesting back in, it was the 90s. It was called What the Bleep Do We Know? And it's essentially about quantum physics. Say, well, that's science. That's not a bad movie. And in the movie, they were running kind of a dramatic narrative, but then they were also interviewing various scholars, professors, scientists. And at the end of the movie, I'm sitting there, they were interviewing or just showing you who these different scholars, professors were that had appeared in the movie at various places. And they get to this one lady, and I'm just reading what they have there. And they said, this lady is Ramtha as channeled by, and that was the lady's name. And it's like, what? Wait a minute. What that's saying is we're not listening to that lady speak. It's coming through the lady's voice. But that's not who we're hearing tell us this information. There's this fallen angel, whatever you want to call him, this creature from beyond, some other disembodied dimension by this other name that's speaking through her. And they had it in the movie as if it was just as credible as a scientist. And you could say, well, she's just wacko. She's just got some mental problems. No, that's not what's going on. Somebody could give it that definition, but that's not necessarily what's going on. So the big question is, it's like, wait a minute, should I even watch that movie? Well, I didn't know anything about it. I thought I was watching a movie about quantum physics, explaining how the theory worked, which is no different than taking geometry class in 8th grade. This is the Pythagorean theorem. This is algebra. This is 2 + 2 = 4. It's like, where do we draw the line? Well, what happened, going back with Balaam, is that Balaam said to kings of Midian and Moab, he says, the way to get Israel to curse itself, Yahweh just said, the reason Israel can't be compromised, can't be stopped or thwarted, is because there's no sorcery and divination. So what you do is you bring your prettiest little girls like Cosby, and you get her to come in and wrap her tentacles, as it were, around the hearts of the men of Israel and bring with them their gods, the worship of their deities, which is not Yahuwah. And then as the men of Israel get their hearts corrupted and turn away from Yahweh, wham, he's going to curse them himself, or they've actually cursed themselves, and his fury will be poured out on them, and they'll be compromised, eliminated, overwhelmed, overcome. And that's what we were reading about in Isaiah. That's what ticks him off, is Israel going after other Elohim. So that's what they did. So there Balaam was hired to project a curse, which he couldn't do. All he could do is state the obvious, which is that Israel is blessed. But he told the enemy how to get Israel to curse themselves, because Yahweh even said. So in other words, this isn't a secret. Don't tell anybody. Yahweh says to Israel, basically, hey, Israel, you are blessed. And the last words out of Moshe's mouth, the very end of Deuteronomy, he says, who is like you, Israel? Their Elohim is right there with them, so close whenever they call. Nobody else is like you, Israel. But your enemies will try to deceive you. That's the only weapon, that's the only tactic, that's the only maneuver, according to Moshe, that the enemy has. And so then you take that in mind, and you go back and you look at every Bible story. That's what's going on. If the enemy can sneak it, forget the enemy. Well, if the devil, forget the devil. See, this is a padedu, a dance of two between Yahweh and Israel. And Yahweh doesn't say, just only have eyes on me and don't look or don't think. It's like, no, he's saying, you're going to be surrounded by all other distractions. And I'm telling you, Israel, if you don't listen to my voice, you've had it. You're bringing it down upon yourself. So he sticks the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the middle of the garden, and he says to Adam, don't eat. And what did the Nachash do? He came up to LYHUH and started reasoning with her. It looks pretty good. Did Yahweh say that? He said you're going to die the day that you eat it. You're not going to die. A direct contradiction. See, the devil, people say the Nachash was the devil. Doesn't say it is. Calls him a Nachash, a serpent, and then somewhere, what is it, the book of Peter, the book of James, that old serpent, the devil. Was the serpent in the garden the devil? Maybe it was. I don't know. It doesn't say that it was. It doesn't say that it was in the book of Genesis. It says it's a Nachash, Nun Chet Shin. And if you look at the definition of that, it means copper or brass or shiny or to be enchanting. Like, wow, look at that. Like CGI, computer generated graphics, images. There's some really interesting stuff you can look at these days. Does that mean it's bad? Does that mean it's wrong? Does that mean it's evil? Where do you draw the line? What can we do? What should we not do? But Yahweh said to Adam, I'm telling you, this is your only, here's the line, do not eat of that fruit. And then the Nachash comes up and asks LYHUH, and she says, well, we're not supposed to eat the fruit, don't even touch it. And I've heard people say, you're supposed to only regard what Yahweh said, don't add or take away. Eve must have been talking to Adam, and they added, don't even touch it. That's where she blew it. And it's like, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. But then the Nachash said, you're not going to die. So there was the contradiction. Yahweh said, you will die. And the Nachash said, you're not going to die. Now, we have the, what they call Monday quarterbacking, the game on Sunday, and you're in the middle of the game. You can't see what's going on, but you step back after the game's over and you watch what went down and how it did it. And you look at the film and you go, oh, look, wow, sure, why didn't we see that? So we have the advantage of looking at the Torah and say, here's a blow by blow, event by event. What exactly happened? Yahuwah said something as an instruction, and there was a voice to the contrary, a contradiction. That's what happened in the Garden of Eden. And so they looked at the fruit. LYHUH did, and then said Adam was with her. So they said, it looks pretty good. Doesn't seem deadly. Let's go ahead and eat it. He said not to. And then when Yahweh confronts him, he said, hey, Adam, who told you were naked? Did you perhaps eat of the fruit that I told you not to eat? I mean, he goes right to the point. I told you not to eat. Did you eat? Oh, well, the girl you gave me, the woman, she suggested, and I, boom, who's the culprit? Whose fault is it? And it's like, Adam, look at it, it's your fault. You were told to do something and you didn't. You listened to the voice of your wife instead of the voice of your Elohim. Big trouble. And if you look real closely, it's an interesting thing. While they were in the garden, they didn't have to toil. They didn't have to plant and reap. They just picked fruit off the trees and they ate anything that was on the trees. They just put out their hand and ate. That was the word Eden, Gan Eden, Garden of Eden. Eden means delicate, delight, luxury, pleasant. It's where we get the word, put an H in front of it, and you get the word hedon, hedonism, where everything's wonderful and easy. they were allowed to put out their hand and eat. But as soon as they put out their hand and ate what Yahweh said didn't, he said, okay, you want to put your hand to something that I told you not to do? I'm not going to change everything. Now you're going to have to put your hand to the plow, and you're going to have to work to eat. He somehow uses the very act of the sin, act of the corruption, as an expression of the curse that you get. Just something to bear in mind if you want to analyze the various Bible stories. Look for that theme. Everything's tied together, just like the meanings of names. Call his name Yahusha or Yahshua, because this one will save his people from their sin, from their sins. He will save. Shua or Shin Ayin, save, but it's also delight. Shasha. Call his name Yah or Yahu Shah. Yah, Yod He or Yod He Vav. It's to exist, and the Yod prefix means he will. So it's not necessarily, depending on how you analyze the name Yahusha or Yahushua, it's not necessarily saying Yahweh is going to save. It's going to he will, or he, that's the Yod prefix. He Vav has to do with the verb to exist. He will exist salvation, or he will do the saving, or he will cause the salvation event to activate, be viable, be happening. We talked last week about like that word Azri El. It means my help, El. Translated God. God is my help. There's no is. The isness is the word spelled with Yod, He's, and Vavs, maybe even Alephs. Words with those consonants plugged in are always the verb to be or to exist. So anytime you look at the word, you have to sit there and wrap your mind around it. I'm saying that because part of the study, what I've found personally, is that the way I was taught to read English is you learn the phonics, letter by letter, and then you learn to just look at a word and know what the word is. As a matter of fact, there was a video thing, it was called I Pet Goat. That was kind of an animated thing, but it was based on the fact that George Bush, the president of the United States, the morning of 9/11, was sitting in a school down south somewhere, and the teacher was teaching these grade school kids how to just look at a word and boom, know instantly what it was. See the word and speak the word. Seeing the word is a clump, not as a phonetic assembly. And she was saying plane, must, hit. And it's like, just when the message came in about the towers being hit by plane, it's like, how ironic, how incredible. Why would she say those words to those children just as that event was happening? And then somebody from the Secret Service came in and gave the message to the president, who was sitting there, and it's like, it's almost creepy. That of all things she would teach the children to read, that was the 3 words that was on camera being filmed at that moment. Anyway, the point is, if you learn how to read English, there's the word. I can see the word. It says stop. I stop. It doesn't. I don't have to read st. Oh, pa, but that's the way you learn to read. I'm suggesting that the best way to learn Hebrew is to read it the slow way. Even if you can recognize the words in big words, oh, I know what this word is saying. Okay, got that. Just like, no, hodu, hey vav, dalet vav, ho-du. And then you sit there and break down the letters, the prefix, the suffix, why? Because that's the meditating. So the word Haggah, mentioned last week, Haggah, navigate, meditate, the phonetic spelling of words. Aleph Vav Tav is the letter. Aleph Yod Tav is the word that means to spell words. That's also where they get the word for casting spells. In English, to cast a spell is to pick the right words. That's doing witchcraft and sorcery and magic arts, is to pick the words because of certain letters and say them in such a way that you're now invoking a demonic interjection into somebody else's life to bring some kind of harm or effect or adjustment to what otherwise is just the flow of circumstances. We're told not to do that. As far as I know, that's what he says. Do not engage in that behavior. I've looked into what some people regard of spelling words. Somebody gave me a book. I can't remember the guy's name, but it had to do with looking at Greek. Well, it looked at Greek and Hebrew and Celtic runes and Nordic ogams, I think is what it was called. The way they spell their words. And with the way some of the runes would be is almost like Roman numerals. Each letter was given a certain shape, and they'd cut these notches on a stick, and then you'd stick the stick in the ground, and if you knew how to read, you'd see that stick and you'd knew how to communicate the message. Almost like hieroglyphics, only they were with geometric forms, slashes and marks and X's, rather than necessarily pictographic forms. Is that bad? That's just spelling words. And that some people who involve themselves in magic arts say, and which according to this book, they said, oh, Hebrew is the most powerful language. So some people think that looking at Hebrew is occultic, is sorcery. Some people call it Kabbalah. Some people just say, stay away from it. I don't need that. I'm not even getting close to any of that stuff. Again, where do you draw the line? I'm just saying so that people know. I'm aware of the fact I haven't looked into any of that stuff. I haven't pursued any of that stuff. I'm just looking at the words written in the Torah, spelled by the letters of the 22-letter alphabet, and the Mishkan pattern being Yahuwah's personal signature. And what I'm saying is that I think what that means is that if I ascribed a different value to the same Hebrew letters that were of, let's say, sorcery, occultic value, I could use the same letters and it would take on all that meaning. And then I could use it to cast spells or to write things which had nothing to do with Yahuwah, even though it was his letters, because it's the value that I appropriate to each one of those figures, those glyphs, those alphabetic letters. But the thing about the Mishkan pattern is that it's correlated to the Moedim, the ayin dalets, the witness and testimony, which is Yahuwah's own personal expression of bejewelment. And then to see that that's correlated to the Mishkan, which is his architectural design that he gave Moshe, and that he empowered Bezalel and Aholiab to have the skill to make, to do. That's all his stuff. There's nothing occult. There's nothing of Elohim Achrim. There's no sorcery in that. And then to see also that it plays right in there parallel with the 7 days of creation, and then the Genesis 1, and then the Beatitudes of Matthew 5. And then I can see the entire narrative story of Yeshua coming from heaven to earth. That's all his signature. So for me to hold to that and say that is the value that I'm giving every letter, that's Yahweh's Avot, the Elohim of Israel. And regardless of whether anybody else gives a different spin to the value, the meaning of the letter, or to say they mean nothing, Miles Jones, Michael Brown, and Michael Heiser, insist that the letters mean nothing. Well, but they don't see the Mishkan pattern. There it is. Okay, but that's in my own mind. That's in my own estimation of value. What's it worth? Can I assess? Can I praise? Can I see? Can I determine? That's Shin Ayin Resh. That's Ayin Resh Kaf. That's Shin Bet. That's to think and look and determine, I see this. This is what's going on. Am I just making this up, or am I given an awareness as to this is what Yahuwah built already? Put it into the universe. I think that's what it is. And if somebody else says, shut up, you're just making that up, well, then call it poetic license or artistic license for me to say, hey, it's just art. It's just expression. Don't get bent out of shape about it. You can imagine the letters being anything you want. If you want to think of the letters as at face value, Aleph is ox, Bet is house, Gimel's camel, Dalet's door, go ahead. Leave it there if you want. I don't care. Just leave it there. But to see this pattern, I believe, is like seeing into another dimension. An interesting thing, I heard somebody or saw somebody write something that when Jacob, two different events, one's that he was a place called Bethel, and that's where he had, I believe, the vision of the staircase or the ladder staircase into the heavens, and he said, wow, I didn't even realize this is the door of heaven. I'm going to call this Bethel, the house of God, Bethel. But there was another time when he named it, I believe it was Jacob named it Penei, Penun Yod, El. So that's the face of God, Penei El, or Penun Yod, Penei or Panim is all face. So Panim is plural, but Penei is also face. But Yod is the suffix, means mind. Penun is the word that's just translated the dictionary to say sort, kind, type, class, sect, categorization. Pan is the word that, like, we have panorama, or the pan view is the whole scope. But it also means to turn away, to be on vacation, to be a bachelor. I'm not having any concern. To evacuate something. So it's both to be looking right at it, or it's also to be looking away. Well, in quite often words are both the same meaning, the positive and the negative, you might say, in the same word. So to read, to know that, and to read and say, okay, when he called this place Panei El, that means the face of God. That means he realized, I think, if I recall correctly, I think that's where he was wrestling with the angel, that he called that place Panei El. Well, somebody, I saw it online or wherever it was, the day where they said, wait a minute, that's the same as the English word pineal gland. See, as soon as you say pineal instead of Panei El, it's like, well, that's the one little dot right inside the center of your brain that gets crusted over when you have fluoride in your water. It gets calcified. And the fluoride is an off product of mining uranium or something, I think. And so somebody had the big idea, oh, let's put that in the drinking water. They did that right after World War II. It's supposed to help your teeth. Yeah. And it crusts over your pineal gland, which physically eliminates your ability to engage the divine. In other words, you can pray without, you're just giving words, but you're not having a sense of engaging with the God you're praying to. Is that science, or is that religious, or is that woo-woo? Apparently it's biological, physiological. The pineal gland, I've heard numerous people say, if it's accurate, that is what the Creator put in the brain as the thing that resonates, that works, that somehow functions as the door of connecting with Him face to face, as it were. Is that true? I don't know. But if you drink fluoride in your water, brush your teeth with toothpaste that has fluoride in it, it's going to disable you from having a spiritual relationship? Why would He allow that to happen? I'm just saying, you hear these ideas, and you know, if I talk about these things, just so you know, they're going to rip this video right off the internet. So you got to be careful how you say what you say. It's for entertainment value only. That's why people say that. So it's like, yeah, I'm just talking, and you can make of it whatever you will. But what I'm saying is, if that's true, if I choose to believe that's true, then you start thinking about that, and all of a sudden you see all these different things on the internet talking about how to get your pineal gland open, or your third eye open, as they say, you know, the eyeball thing that, oh gosh, it gets into all that stuff. Yeah, just read the Bible and sing your Christmas songs and be done with it. Is it true or is it not? Is it, if you listen to certain notes, if you stop brushing your teeth with fluoride, if you eat certain food, or if you have a certain frame of mind, your pineal gland will open. And you'll be able to see into this other dimension of reality. And you just might notice that there's a thing called the Mishkan pattern. Is it all tied together? Maybe. Well, you look at the book of Revelation, and Yeshua had these 7 stars in his hand, and he said, oh, what's the secret of the 7 stars? Oh, this is a message sent by my messengers to the 7 assemblies. What's a kakab? A fire extinguisher. So what apparently he's saying, 5 minutes here, is that if you guys, Israel assembly, don't do what I say. Come on, is that the dynamic nature of the relationship? Don't do what I say or you're in big trouble. Really? He's that kind of authoritarian tyrant? Maybe so. What's our relationship with him? If you guys don't do what I say, I'm going to quench your light, break the branch off of the lampstand and throw it into the fire. Remember, he said something about, I'm the vine, you're the branches. And if you don't bear fruit, my Father, who's the husbandman, the farmer, the arborist, he's going to cut your branch off and throw it in the fire. Well, what if he ends up with just a stump with no branches? Well, then he's going to graft wild branches into that stump stalk, and he's going to grow his tree with whoever will do what he says. So the conflict that I see putting all this stuff together here, ever since the beginning, is what did Yahweh say to his people? And if his people is Adam, if his people's Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, those are the principal characters as you read through the storyline of Genesis. The 12 tribes. David appears out of that. David and Solomon coming up to Yeshua. Yeshua said, I'm only doing what I see my Father doing. I am not here running my show, doing my agenda. Whatever you hear from me is, I heard my Father say it. I am not coming up with my own words, my own thoughts, my own. What does that mean? He appeared in a subservient, the bet to his Father's aleiphness. But he said, but we're Echad. And then remember in the Garden of Gethsemane, he said, he's praying that we would be Echad, same way he's Echad. So he was saying that we have this capacity to operate and function like that. And if we did, what would we be doing? We'd be doing what we heard our Father telling us to do. I know there's some people that can see, let's just say demons, angels, spirits. Some people see Yeshua, some people claim to see the Father. It's like, whatever, that's their life, their business, but they can see, some people can. Whether or not they're of Yahuwah, I don't know, but I can't see anything like that. But I can see this Mishkan pattern in the Hebrew alphabet, and I can see what he says to his people. And what he says to his people is, Israel, do what I say. Now, if you don't do what I say, Now you've compromised yourself and your enemy can get in. And whether the enemy is the devil, going about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour, or whether it's the Romans or the Americans or the commies or the Nazis or the Aztec, Mayan, Chinese, whoever, Vikings, whoever the enemy is, you make yourself susceptible and vulnerable to them as soon as you stop listening to me and do what I say. So is our warfare, is our effort, plead the blood and bind the devil? I know a lot of people that's their whole consciousness. I was at churches where that was their consciousness. Or should our consciousness be, what did Yahweh say? Let's understand it and do it. That was never part of it. Why not? Because we'd already been invaded by the likes of Balaam and the king of Moab and Midian and Cosby, the pretty little girls with their Elohim Achrim. That's what compromised Solomon, remember? Solomon, the wisest and wealthiest man ever to live on the face of the earth, and he was compromised because he had so many wives and concubines. He was making alliances with various other cities and kingdoms by bringing in their girls, and then he allowed them to have their temples and burn incense to their deities, which then affected the whole nation of Israel and pulled him completely away from Yahuwah. He lost sight of Yahuwah's exclusivity. So what are we to be? If we were going to be the QADOSH GABOR, the holy knight of Yahuwah, who does not get his branch of the menorah broken off and thrown into the fire, but his stars brightly shining, what must we do? Listen to his voice and do what he says. We can take a break here in a moment, but just to say, there is an interesting thing, just what's become the modern culture, is that police, a lot of times they'll have a camouflage or black shirt on, but on their back they'll have across the top police or ATF or FBI or sheriff or something like that. You have it on your back, right across the shoulder, maybe even written in fluorescent or iridescent letters so that your guys can see you. You don't ever want to turn your back and run from the enemy because then it illuminates. So what if you were going to be on Yahuwah's Gabor team? What would that look like? Something like Gabor LYHUH. How do you be Gabor LYHUH? Got to take a break.